Hello, everyone.
Hey, Sana.
Hey, Bernard. Subhash, are you going to present on the closed loop assurance today? Hello?
Hi.
Oops, I was thinking if my mic's working or not. Subhash, have you joined? I can see Stu Subhash. I don't know what's going on with his mic, I guess. Subhash, your audio is moving, but I can't hear you. So
During the setup phase, I would like to quickly introduce my colleague, Bojan Banev from DT. He will also be joining this Nephew project and then sort of supporting me also in driving these activities for the DT.
that's excellent, Bernard. I'm very happy to see Bojan here. I have been talking to Bojan for some time, and I think he would be also a very good contribution to our discussions in SIG architecture.
Agree. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Bernard,
you.
for introducing and bringing him here.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for extending the invitation.
I look forward to working with you both, Bojan and Bernard. That's very collaborative from DT's side. So today I had a discussion with Kaushik this morning, and he's not going to join, so we can get started. And my idea was that this session is going to be dedicated to the closed loop assurance discussion. And Subhash was supposed to present, and I haven't heard back from Subhash yet if his mic's still working or not.
Yeah, hi Sana.
Hi,
I'm
Subhash.
available. Yeah.
Perfect. If you don't have anything else, I think it's almost 4 minutes into the meeting. Subhash, I will give the floor to you so you can share your screen and start the presentation.
Sure, thank you.
Perfect.
I'll try to share my screen. Okay, please let me know if it's visible.
Yeah, we can see that, yes.
Okay. So actually, so 2 weeks back, when we were first drafted this idea, is how we can include the service assurance. So that time we went through the entire idea, like how we can scope nephew, and also there are certain boundaries where we need to think around, like where exactly the nephew fits, or any SMO, or any orchestrator comes into the picture. So those things we wanted to think around, and at the same time we wanted to fulfill the use case of the service assurance. And in this context, we were going through this picture, we were just talking about how the orchestrator works with different domains, and try to create a service in different domains. And then we were trying to fit monitoring and analytics. So that will come as a component of service assurance. So this so monitoring component will fetch the metrics from different layers. So those layers are like end-to-end service, which is you can think like a customer service, which is more focused towards the customer side. And then each domain would be having another sub service. It's like a end-to-end service will be composed of the different services. So you can imagine like that. I mean, like access and your transport. So I did not detail much on the transport, and then the core. And this all includes some kind of CNFs, and that relies over the infrastructure. So the idea was, let's try to pull the KPI parameter from respective layers, and try to make it more configurable monitoring, right? So that was the idea. And once we are able to fetch the KPIs, perform the analytics on this KPI parameter. But yeah, here we should think around hierarchical relationship between those KPI parameter. So that will help us to finally do the root cause analysis. Something has broken on the infrastructure level, but it is impacting your end-to-end service quality. So analytics should be model should define with such a way that we'll able to root cause it immediately. And yeah, this whole thing should be correlated. And once we are able to find the summary, or to find out, we are able to find some kind of result, then we'll try to create one feedback mechanism. So it was just a idea. So I was going through the comments from the last week. We were not trying to build something new here. We are just proposing one concept, or the idea, so that we can build an FAO more mature, and we'll try to target one use case. So use case, and also we will try to bring some building block around this idea, and finally we'll able to achieve the service assurance. And yeah, behind this, there are multiple challenges, like how we are going to work with the upper layer. So that I'm calling as the orchestrator, end-to-end orchestrator. So how we'll work with the orchestrator, or maybe how we are going to define our monitoring, how we perform the analytics. So just I'm trying to bring those challenges so that we can think around it. Okay. And yeah, this is one simplistic picture. And yeah, certain steps we were discussed about it. Like in order to achieve the service assurance, we can take advantage. We need inventory management. So they need a hierarchical relationship. So that inventory, we need to manage it, their relationship. And also we need to take advantage of policy framework, so that we can configure our monitoring, and based on certain policy we were able to fetch it. And based on those fetched KPI, we can do some kind of rectification steps. And finally we realize our ultimate goal, AI ML based closed loop automation. So this was the just a recap, so that we can discuss on to it. And so we can take any question here now, just to think through it. It's like how exactly service assurance we can deliver by Nephew. Yes, yes, and we can take any question so that we can proceed our discussion.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand this. Sorry if my questions are very fundamental. So when we talk about service assurance, immediately to my mind, it comes to me that there's an end-to-end orchestration, which you also probably called out. And then right now we are thinking about Nephew. At this point of time, Nephew is more about Kubernetes, right? And then I'm expecting that there'll be a heterogeneous environment, right? You can still have some VMs out there, and we can still have some container workloads. Some of this, I think there is this end-to-end orchestrator probably ensuring that this happens. So is your proposal more that, hey, look, we also need some sort of a plugin in the Kubernetes world so that when this end-to-end orchestrator comes in, it is able to know that there is this support available so that it can go push its policies and stuff like that. Am I thinking correctly here, or am I way off? I'm just...
you are correct. It's like just I was putting my thought like if you look at closely in Nephew we are trying to deliver one domain orchestrator, right? So domain orchestrator, you can imagine like it has its own domain where it can do the automation, right? But when we create an end-to-end service, that I feel like it is somewhere for the upper layer, or even we can think like Nephew could also deliver it. So that layer actually we need to define it. Actually, if you remember in the last meeting, actually Ravi have brought a very good point. We need to define that layer actually that separates the Nephew from the orchestrator. So what exactly the Nephew's responsibility? So that is still we haven't defined somewhere. And even if you look at our architecture also, you can find there is a mix and match between this upper layer. So that visualization I am also trying to bring it here, like end-to-end service that should be something like a upper layer should be responsible for it. And when we come to our domain, either access, either core, or just a transport, I'm taking it's a black box. So if you go to that domain, then Nephew should take the responsibility. It should have the monitoring. It should have the analytics. It should correlate it, and it should have its own closed loop system. So I'm talking about automation in the entire domain, and Nephew should deliver it. And the upper layer should be able to use it. So I think
so that means there are certain northbound APIs that some APIs that needs to be exposed by Nephew so that this upper layer can actually. I'm trying to interpret this. That the end-to-end, for example, if you take own app today is I consider it to be an end-to-end one, right? So if I were to go do a POC with that, there needs to be, and it has got OpenStack and it's got Kubernetes. And if you were to try to apply this, there are certain things provided by OpenStack. We might want something similarly from Kubernetes. Is how I try to correlate this here. So that's what you're expecting. For example, on the OpenStack side of things, there is EAT, which is a resource orchestrator and also provides some ceilometer and stuff like that, that provides analytics. And you're expecting something similar. Maybe I'm not completely right, but that's what I'm trying to draw a parallel here. I see.
My thoughts are also matching with you, Vish.
Okay.
And also opening the question to the community, whether is it possible that Nephew could take a responsibility for the end-to-end service? We are capable, I think, in my opinion, because we are doing the domain orchestration. So is it okay if we just move our we capture end-to-end service also in our scope? So that question I also would like to open it so that we can understand.
Definitely not in scope at this point of time, Subhash. End-to-end service.
Yeah.
When you say end-to-end service, you mean to say I'm imagining when you say end-to-end service, I mean, it's not only in the Kubernetes world, it could be stitching services between your Kubernetes world, maybe even your physical devices, etc. That's what I think when you, at least that's my understanding of when you say end-to-end world. I'm not sure that's in the scope at all.
Okay.
I mean, others can chime in. I mean, we have other experts here too, but if that is the definition of your end-to-end service, at least that is not in scope immediately. At least not, at least not in the R2, R3 timeframe for sure.
Right, Bala, you're right. Our immediate scope for Nephew is to be able to solve the scope of the VNF manager and somewhat the capabilities of the NFU, which includes sometimes the relationship between the NF, but not to the full scope of even NFU at the moment. And this could evolve, but at the moment, it's just focusing on this aspect, and it's going to be perfecting that aspect so that it can actually bring value to the industry. But then we go to the second point, and we have lots of raised questions. I'll just make my comment short that how do we interact with the existing systems that it could still bring value? I think that's the exercise that we are still focusing on, and that's why this topic of discussion is very interesting from operational aspects. We have lots of raised hands. We'll let them flow in the order.
Yeah, next then operations.
Yeah, I think that you answered partially. When I see this architecture detail, I was worried about the hierarchical and the functional demarcation, because Nephew current scope NF and infrastructure possibly monitoring some analytic processing, but not the full scale of the NS and end-to-end. End-to-end services like ONF SO, there's end-to-end service facing the customer side. They have multiple the NS inside, and they decompose and they process NF. But those things is kind of beyond the Nephew state. I think that some of the discussion already discussed about this. This are not part of the some of the Nephew function. That's fine. Second question is the correlation. I think the Nephew perspective, we can provide some analytic data, possibly, and monitor data, but any of them, if you want to stitch all the top to bottom hierarchical correlation, maybe typically is the external the capability to from my perspective, we use the external the analysis system, which collecting all the data and then stitching together. That's what things. I'm not sure how the Nephew itself can handle this correlation, because they only see limited view, not the full service view. So anyway, that's my second question. First question already answered partially. Second question, I'm not sure correlation is part of the Nephew, or we're talking about external capability.
I had a similar, since I also raised my hand, I had a similar point. So being I also raised concern, then we can discuss it together. Yeah. So I share what being just said. There are two main pieces here that Subhash here presented. First of all, thank you for this, putting together this documentation and the nice diagrams and the explanation. Really appreciate it. But there are two big pieces here. One is monitoring and one is the closed loop automation that is done through analytics and correlation that you are expressed. So I think those two are two big pieces. In my opinion, they need to be separated for some of the reasons that being expressed. For example, if we just play in the area of domain orchestration, to Being's point, we may not have the picture of end-to-end thing, because we may not have all the business domain expertise, or we may not have even the infrastructure insights or the utilization insights into whatever is going on in the end-to-end service if we are not playing that role. So somebody may be sitting above us, may not be even the end-to-end orchestrator, even the OSS system that is sitting above all of us may be playing that role of correlating data, collecting data, and doing that analysis, looking at the world data from different worlds and making the decision. That is one thing. That was, so I have one other point, but I will raise it later. But since since it's very similar to what being said, let's discuss this now about separating monitoring and analytics, or if it is analytics, what role does Nefio play at all? If it just plays a role of a domain orchestrator.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great point. I think in one quick notice, in ONAP, for example, we handle this situation. We try to handle. We define hierarchical orchestration, end-to-end NS and NF and the infrastructure. But stitching all together, because we have each one, they providing their own data, but they don't have full view. But NS level, they have some view, and the end-to-end, they have some view, and then we going up to OSS level, then they have a different view. That's why the real correlation, they know what's going on, is external. We rely on. But anyway, just my point. It's a good diagram and a good initiative, but we have many things to think about. Okay, thank you. So
right. Many discussions still need to happen. I think one of the comments that I would like to give to your question is that when you look at the cloud native system, and recently we have published a document in the NGMN as well, and there was a consensus for all 10 operators when we were publishing the various notes around the cloud native best practices. One thing that I did pay a close attention to is that whenever there is a closed loop requirement, the closed loop doesn't have to be centralized as we had the previous concept of ONAP, of the DCAE, in which everything was centralized. It could be segregated, it could be decoupled, it could be created in a model of microservices where each decision is happening for the domain closer to that domain. And then eventually there is a model that exists between them to basically correlate. Say, for example, we needed the model like that for network slicing, where an end-to-end closed loop would also be something that the picture has to be built and the actions have to be taken on those triggers and those decisions as well. But closer to the autonomy, an action closer to the lowest level of the control and autonomy, I think, is the best practice in a cloud native system, which means that whatever is the resources for which Kubernetes is responsible, which has the full control of the infrastructure and network function if you deploy it with Nephew, then within the Kubernetes layer, there has to be some degree of analytics and some degree of action mechanics that can complete the closed loop there. It might not be the service level view, but that has to be the network function or the infrastructure level view. But then it also has to complete the big picture that something has to come from the service layer analytics and has to give that trigger again. Action would always reside with the resource layer. We have seen that experimenting. So we have to have something local and the ability to take the trigger externally for some other big picture that that local domain has not been able to see.
Yes, I totally agree with this point. As you brought an interesting topic like making a local decision while doing the closed loop. So I think we need to take one balanced approach. Some decision we could take at the local level, but I think some decisions are definitely we need to go some centralized entity that we need to analyze and correlate it. I think that approach also we need to think it, because in my opinion, you can make some kind of policies by analyzing the KPI parameter then and there, configure it, but policy will get triggered directly by the Kubernetes. You can assume that it is happening in band. I'll just take a term in band. It is happening then and there. But yeah, certain scenarios, I might not be able to give example right away. But yeah, certain scenario there you need to collect the information. You need some time to correlate it, or maybe you give the opportunity to your ML models to run, analyze, create some kind of recommendation, and then create a policy, and then push those policies to your Kubernetes system so that you can take some kind of action there. So we need to also think around it. So that option, I think we should check once. What do you think?
We have lots of hands up, so maybe we
next
let
is,
people a
I
chance
think
to get. Bernard's been up for a very long time, I think.
Okay.
I just want to sort of start with a very small step. And the small step is basically simply saying that whatever kind of service assurance tool we would be using, we would need to know about the configuration items and the relationships. Yeah, that means sort of one of the first aspects which we could try to cover is how do we want to forward this information to any kind of external system for service assurance purposes. And if that's sort of then again part of Nevio or something else, we can decide later on. But I believe capturing those main elements which we believe would be of relevance for service assurance would be one of the first things which we should try to identify.
Yeah, I agree with Bernard. So, Bernard, would you like to point these steps? Are you referring these steps for this year initial step? Okay. So Bernard has also suggested these steps, is how we can approach towards service assurance. Means like how we could collect those parameter and how we can analyze it. So those we tried to capture it in each step. Like in step 1, I said how we are going to manage the inventory, and it's a relationship for analyzing. The step 3 we call it observation, like whether we need to define the policy for those observations, like the latency, CPU uses, those parameters. So this you can think like infrastructure level KPI parameters, and then we need to analyze it. It's whether it's whether it's crossing the threshold. There could be multiple type of analysis. Actually, I'm just pointing out a threshold. And yeah, rectification step as the next step. And yeah, step 6 is our prediction optimization to realize AIML. So this was the steps we were thinking around how we could do as an initial step to achieve the service assurance in the NFU.
Yeah. Maybe so we could also rephrase the title with sort of steps to achieve service assurance with Nevio, not in Nevio, just to make it more clear. Okay. Yeah.
So
I think Wim is next.
Yeah, I wanted to. I mean, my view is the following: is that closed loop, let's say, is relevant at all the layers, right? And including Nevio, right? Because, for example, we will need it, for example, to probably this, like in the scheduler, we want to use it to, let's say, determine a health of a server, whether it's not good or bad, and then we can do auto scaling or different things like that, right? So in other words, in order, for me, I think we have more baby steps to cover before we go into the end-to-end assurance side. So, and I think we started to have some activity around observability, which could be, for me, as a starting point of a lot of these things. For example, I think of other use cases that we can, let's say, look at already. Of course, we need to have first the observability covered, but like we do an upgrade of a network function, right? We do canary. We want to actually see, is that new instance performing aligned with our expectation? And we run it for some time, and after a while, we decide, yes, it's good enough. So we go and continue, right? So there are very small things that we can already do with it, or that we should extend in Nevio, in my view, that focus on NF to infra, right? Probably not towards the end-to-end, but more towards the relationship between network function and infrastructure. And there is a number of things that we can do already in that layer before we address the full end-to-end assurance, because that's a huge topic, right? So, but I wanted to say two things. One is, I think in my view, this whole closed loop, and whether it's service assurance, I mean, it's a level of assurance in my view, because a network function should be assured to function. So it will have to have a set of KPIs to indicate I'm doing okay or not okay, aligned with what I'm supposed to do. And based on that, some actions can be taken. That doesn't mean that you're looking at end-to-end service, but you're looking at an aspect that is, let's say, relevant for the domain that we are operating in. And there is many things with respect to assurance that we can do already within that, let's say, layer or domain that will help eventually to get us towards the service, the end-to-end service assurance, where we have to provide input, in my view, towards that end-to-end service system.
Right.
These are my 2 cents.
Yeah, Wim. I'm completely aligned with your thoughts. Actually, I also seeing it. We are currently trying to deliver infrastructure monitoring. This particular block we are currently working on it. So that means we are able to read the infra-related KPI parameters. And once that we will able to read it, definitely we are able to perform certain kind of analytics on top of it. But yeah, here if you see in our baby steps to complete this closed loop, what we are trying to do, we are thinking that policy could also make a place here, so that we can configure any deployment with some monitoring configuration. It may be maybe something like log collection, maybe something like creating a sidecar. It is pushing some log for analysis. That also that we gave in our baby steps, and then perform certain analytics and try to do one small closed loop without involving much on the NF layer. And I'm just extending my thought. So imagine like we are able to perform tomorrow, let's say observability make some progress, and we are able to collect the NF related KPIs, right, in the future. And that time we should also think how those parameters can be correlated with infra related KPIs. For example, let's say certain NF. Take an example of maybe firewall. It's performing very poor. Maybe because its interface is down or some link is down. So those information need to be correlated and need to perform some root cause analysis. So there I feel we can involve these 2 layers and work on it. So slowly when the capability of Nephew get slowly evolves, and we are able and observability able to monitor this all KPI parameter, I think that time we can perform some full-fledged use cases. But of course, we can work on certain POC which involve certain pieces, maybe infra analytics, and we can deliver some closed loop to take action. So that definitely that will give us some input, so that we can take those inputs, work on the R3, and refine our ideas. So that opportunity we have it, I think, in my opinion.
Subhash, I think lots of discussions happening on the chat as well.
Yep.
One of the things that I would like to get out of this exercise are, of course, the user stories that you guys have put together, and we don't have to finish all of it in one session because there are many raised hands and everyone's trying to basically.
Yep. Okay. So
I think next is Ravi. I think probably I have something, but I'll go after that because I don't want to hog the time. Ravi, I'll let you go.
Yeah, thanks, Bala. So yeah, so I think probably that first point that you have there, Subhash, right?
Yep.
So that thing about configuring the workload, right? So can you come down a bit? Operator should configure the workload or something that you had there. So that is where I was. Not this one. I think it was somewhere else. But but then I also saw that your focus is not on the actually collecting the metrics from the service point of view. Like, I mean, for example, RAN, it's not like you're collecting PDCP or a MAC or RLC kind of metrics here, right? Or basically looking at GTP status from the UPF or basically any service related metric. You're focusing primarily on metrics that we kind of manage in terms of either infrastructure, say, I mean, looking at some interface status on a server, or or any other resource, like for probably the CPU resource and things like that. I'm assuming that is the scope. Here it's not, when you say service.
Yeah, we are
right?
just correcting it. I'm just correcting it. So here, what I'm trying to say that the observability modules would be having the responsibility to collect KPI from different layers like infrastructure, NF, NS. So it is their responsibility. Okay. And I'm not. I just gave an example like currently we are capable enough to collect CPU utilization or memory utilization from in context of infra. But NF should able to deliver this KPI readings, right? So still it depends on the NF or NF vendor, I would say. So this part again, like I did not put much thought, but yeah, my idea, my thought process is like tomorrow we'll able to collect this this KPI parameters from the monitoring.
Yes, so that's what I'm saying. Probably the network. So network function. See, right now, I mean, what are we responsible for? One is basically we say, okay, we configure the infrastructure, then we configure probably the NADs and basically before we deploy the network functions, and then we deploy network functions with certain requirements and so on. So that is the scope. So to collect, so I see within our purview we say infrastructure monitoring, network function monitoring, and network service monitoring. This has always been something that I have a question in mind, because we say, okay, we are also going to handle, say, the O1 Yang models or 3GPP Yang models. So this is not clear to me exactly. Are we just being kind of handle it in opaque manner, or we kind of saying that, okay, if I'm configuring my UPR service level parameters, then I'm also responsible to do the day kind of two operations of to kind of monitor it? Because generally, when you say end-to-end service orchestration, you're basically service assurance is sitting somewhere there, kind of handling it. But for these other two pieces, it's there, because we say that, okay, we are going to configure a topology with a UPF or with some control plane functions, or even probably with the ORAN and something like that. And we probably could associate some service assurance metrics related to that. Say that you need latency for this particular slice for this milliseconds, but then or reliability of finite availability if it's URLC. But the key thing is that how do you take those metrics and again further spin it into infrastructure requirements, network function monitoring requirements, and probably there needs to be some operators or controllers to kind of further come into that level of granularity, and then you go into and then deciding what metrics you want to kind of make sure that those SLAs are kind of met in a closed loop manner, right? So I think we need to kind of go down from what we have from R1. And basically, we do not implement probably a topology controller and stuff like that. But I think that seems a good starting point. If I were to associate some assurance metrics there, then how do you kind of go further down to come into more granular FMPM metrics for monitoring and service assurance? I mean, within the context of what we did at R1, probably that's a good starting point.
Yeah. Actually, Ravi, that is a really good point. And also, I had taken a comment from the last week that you wanted to define this layer, right? Means how exactly the service will get involved. So when I look around this domain orchestration, right? So I feel like we should able to automate anything within that domain. So that is our role, right? As an FU, I think. That's my understanding. Like we should able to instantiate, we should able to monitor, or we should able to perform life cycle management also as an FU. Right.
Yeah. So that's what I said. How much of a service level aspect? When you say service, for me, it basically comes into the details of the protocol stack. Are we really involved in that level? Are we just looking at any network function as a network function, right? We don't differentiate UPF from an SMF or AMF, right? But fundamentally, we just look at the network function lifecycle management. And because network functions requiring certain resources, we just make sure that it always has the resources. Or if it requires some kind of, you're monitoring a load balancer, you make sure that there are enough instances behind the load balancer to meet that availability. kind of thing. So I think that needs to be clearly articulated. I mean, how much involvement are we going to have into this service? And we have not touched that. I don't think we have touched that yet. So we have some things related to kind of the edge network operator, where we have we come up with some service level configuration. But I think that was for free 5GC. But at architecture level, I don't think that is clear yet. Yeah. I mean, from the other two pieces, I do understand network function monitoring and infrastructure function.
All right. So, I mean, do we have to, Subhash, you want to respond to that, or are we done with the conversation? If so, I have one question, rather one.
Hey, sorry, I was talking on the mute actually, Bala.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So what I was trying to tell you, we should also. This is actually open question for us also, like how we can take the KPI which are very specific to enough. So how, or a service, how we could bring it, or any operator will push those configurations, what he need to monitor, or how the NFO should get awareness about those KPI parameter. I think that's a good topic to think around. But yeah, as a first step, I think we have sufficient. I think we can work on the infra level that we could collect. So as our first step, and at the same time, we need to debate and understand, discuss on how NF related KPI or NS related KPI we could involve and create a closed loop. Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Subhash. On that one, two questions. So on a material implementation level, are you think of like Prometheus or OpenTelemetry to expose this?
Actually, yeah, this is, I'm opening for the monitoring project or observability project. I think they have planned to use Prometheus. So using the Prometheus, they will able to collect the infra related KPI parameter. And if you go through our steps, what actually Barrad has helped me to prepare it. So as per our initial thought, we would like to bring policy so that it suppose we are deploying certain workload, and we would like to monitor. So policy help us to create those monitoring resources, and it will get deployed, and it either it will pushing the KPI parameter to Prometheus, or maybe for the initial thought, we are taking a help of ELK stack just to collect the logs. If let's say if we don't have any other option, or if we see any better option, we will be open for to switch, means to modify our idea also. So first we need to we will select those logs, either KPI parameter, where the policy will get involved. We'll analyze something. Let's say we will do some kind of rectification step, and as part of the rectification step, we will prepare some kind of policy that we will again configure to the workload, so that we can take a in-band decision. So that will do. And yeah, step 6, let's forget about it. It's our ultimate goal. So that was the thought process, how we can demonstrate one closed loop. So that we. So Bala, any question on it?
Yeah. No, that's good. Thank you. I need to go through the document. Thank you. Thanks for that. So the one other things obviously we need to is particularly when it comes to the infrastructure and the K8 platform itself, there are a lot of existing projects which are mature and a lot of being in use, which are already exposing those kind of metrics, both Prometheus metrics and also defined alerts as well. So I would suggest wherever is possible, we should use the existing projects and we should fill the gaps. I know we will have a lot of gaps for the NFO itself, but the existing platform and infrastructure, wherever it's possible, probably we should use the existing projects. That was my comment.
I think Bim is also working on observability part. I think he will able to help us for this particular module, right?
Okay, cool.
So
yeah, we are proposing to use Prometheus Bala for now in the observability.
Okay, observability, and then we'll be using the existing projects if at all.
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
No,
the only thing that we are discussing is how can we generate some metrics from the network function, right? Or even emulate them.
Got it.
Just to be able to do something. So that may be something we might do, but for the rest, we are reusing whatever is there. Nothing new.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Wim and Bala, do we have something documented on the existing projects, like as an industry scan that we can include as a reference in this document just for the knowledge?
At the moment, we selected somehow Prometheus, but because that was
Prometheus makes most natural choice to me. That was coming in my head right from the beginning. So for now, this looks perfect. But
there are some constraints, by the way, Sana. So because Prometheus is only metrics, right? So we sometimes when you have status
has
like
FM and PM both, right, Wim? Within that, in Prometheus, we are also building our internal, like in operations today, the closed loop work, all based on the FM and PM data coming from Prometheus. I know it's limited, but it's most widely adopted and available, even across network functions at the moment.
Yeah, correct. So that's why that was the consensus a little bit that we had. But okay, if people have other views, we can change, of course. But I don't think we want to invent the wheel here, right? What we just want to achieve is having an ability to use that data in the automation or doing some closed loop. So the first step for us was trying to just get data, right, from various sources. That was the first step. And then I think that then from there onwards, we can go further from that. But so the step number one was basically try to get data, and not only from the infra, but also from the network function. And maybe we just emulate, right? So it could also be that we just create an emulator, that we just generate some statistics because we are constrained with FreeFive-GC. I'm not sure whether OAI has better capabilities, but that's kind of what we were thinking for now, just to be able to have something to be able to play with.
Right. And Wim, because it's an architectural call and it's good to have this exercise, maybe I'm also going to ask you one more question, that in our production network today, we are already trying to work on something similar. We are trying to develop a plugin that translates the EMS data into Prometheus, because we felt that we need to bring this data to the Kubernetes knowledge, and that's the only model that we can explore. And I'm sure that there is work in this space, maybe already happening in the telcos or in the vendors community. If you have any knowledge on that, that would also be very useful to understand. How do we bring the telco specific tools data, like for example, the ones in the EMS and VNFMs, and can translate that into a model that Prometheus can absorb, and then eventually we can allow that visibility accessible to Kubernetes to perform all the other correlations that we are talking about. And I think it's a very big barrier from the NF point of view, not so much from the infrastructure point of view, but from the NF. This would continue to be a journey or a struggle if we come to a model.
Now, so I think maybe there's some people raise hands, so we are probably derailing a bit.
Okay. So just one point, and then probably I'll cede the floor to Tal. I know so to your point, Sana, there are some projects, open source projects, such as Node Exporter, and I'm not getting the names, but the whole infrastructure level data collection and exposing them through Prometheus, they're there. And so is the Kubernetes platform itself, such as, for example, how many namespaces, or the limits of all the things. I mean, there are existing projects there which are open source and exposing those metrics using Prometheus. That's what I meant by we should use them. And then probably anywhere like the NFs related or the Nefio specific stuff, we need to identify the metrics and then expose them using the same mechanism so that they all look and feel the same. So with that said, I'll cede the floor to Tal.
Thanks, Tal. Thanks for the comment.
Thanks. That was very formal. The floor is mine, I guess. So look, as I think a lot of us said, there are already a lot of frameworks there with analytics, and many of them funnel into Prometheus. I just want to remind everybody, Prometheus is kind of a pane of glass rather than, it's the collection agents that are more interesting, right? Where the data is coming from, those KPIs. But anyway, I want to point out that what we can really innovate here, and where we have to actually innovate, and I would suggest this as a next step, is being strategic about where the data is, right? Because this diagram that we see in front of us right now is purposely, Subhash made it to be generic, right? Avoiding the implementation details. But our issue is that we have workload clusters and management clusters. This is a huge advantage for us, right? In terms of being able to have a common management plane for everything, right? Both from a managerial perspective and from a workload perspective. But the question then is, if you're applying policies on data, right? One thing you can do, and what has been done until now, is centralizing the data, right? ONAP has this whole project called data moving, right? Which is all about moving data from the edge to the center to one very, very large database, right? And that's a great place. You can apply all your policies in one place, and you have all the data available. But I'm sure a lot of you can think of are getting just anxious hearing about all of this, right? It's not very scalable, right? Every time you add a site, your database has to grow, and you need to bring that data to a central place, and it takes time, and it's not always reliable, and there's a lot of data. So what we can do in Nefio, and I think this has been part of the assumptions in Nefio from the start, is delegating, right? When you have Kubernetes at the edge, you have an orchestrator at the edge. You can apply policies at the edge, right? You can collect data and keep it at the edge rather than moving it to the center. So I would suggest that what's interesting for us in these use cases is not the technologies, because they already exist. We're just going to use them, but rather being strategic about where we place these technologies and where the data is, right? There are many use cases where you have to centralize, right? If you're dealing with a multi-sided policy, you can't put it in a specific site. It has to be in a third place, right? But there are so many policies that get applied at the network function level, or even at the site level, right? If there are multiple network functions in a virtual CU, for example, they can work with each other there. There's no need to move the data into the management cluster. So we have a huge opportunity here for optimization. And yeah, I think this is where Nefio can really innovate, right? Not choosing the technologies. We're just gonna choose the ones that work for us. but we want to be careful in our design here about how it works in terms of Nefio's, I think, innovative architecture. So that's what I wanted to point out. It's the next step. And one final thing, I know there's like skepticism about these diagrams, and this looks really, really big. I emphasized this before. I'll just say it again. And last time, I hope, we're trying here to not create, this isn't a use case quite yet. This is about carving the general space of service assurance. We're hoping to take this and boil it down or distill it into a very, very small user story that we can tackle, right? Because without user stories, we're kind of talking about policies and data collection, and we're not focused on what we actually want to showcase with Nefio. So we're not there yet, but I think this is where we're heading, I think, with the current work. That's it. Thanks. I cede the floor.
Yeah. Thank you, Charles, for actually putting this idea and also elaborating this diagram. Yeah, we are not trying to come up with entirely a new idea. We are just trying to put the thought. It's like something, some opportunities are there. We can think around it, and we can work around, collaborate it, and make it happen. So, and also, yeah, this is very nice thought. Also, Charles has brought up certain policies we can take certain action we can do, take it locally, and for certain things, definitely for the optimization, we need to collect those parameters, KPIs, and try to optimize. Maybe from different edges, we try to collect it, try to compute some kind of a recommendation or policies, and try to apply it. So those opportunities also for us for making some innovation there. Yes.
Right. Subhash, we are only 6 minutes out
Yeah.
since the end of the meeting. I think we had a
Yeah.
lot of interesting discussions, and a lot of discussion even happened on the side pan of the chat as well. And I hope that we have a way to record that and capture that, because I would like to discuss some of the details with Kaushik as well. I think in the next session, what we should really do is, and everybody was pointing to that, is that we need to brainstorm on short-term, achievable user stories that we can actually accomplish. And given what we have done in R1 and what we are working on R2, I think let's pick up from there. And I'm sure that there are some ideas already in the document, but we couldn't get to that part yet. There is a joint consensus around all the discussions in the theme throughout that, is that we need to start something small, something incremental, which is perfectly fine, because that's the actual outcome of this exercise. We have to get there. What I also enjoyed during this session today is that we were able to talk about some of the long-term picture. And I think we need to agree as this group, and the final outcome of this document should actually give us clear user stories that we can actually implement, not in R2, maybe beyond R2, but that should be built on what's being developed in R2 and what's done in R1. Maybe that's where we can pick up the stage and continue the momentum of the implementation. On the architectural side, I do want to have a clear direction out of this exercise, of course, is that this is the scope of Nephew. Like Tol mentioned, we are not reinventing the wheel. The existing projects can be used, but how? I think that's something that we can document. The rest would be the east-west interactions in our APIs. Maybe that's what we can document from Nephew's perspective, because as we arrive on those conclusions and as we draw a clear picture around that, we are better able to answer big questions like how do we evolve our roadmap to basically intersect with the Aura and automation? How do we evolve our roadmap to intersect with the existing OSS, PSS, and the GGPP architecture? Because once we agree to what our scope is and how we are trying to accomplish that, even like on a very small incremental use case, even that decision kind of gives us a big picture on how the rest would evolve eventually for us to intersect with the rest of the world. So we have made some good progress. I think I would ask the community to add your ideas on the user journeys in this document. We can also insert some more diagrams, which could give us a little bit more clear picture, especially Wim and Tol, what's happening in the SIG automation right now. I would love to see how you guys are using Prometheus. What is it that you're doing with the network function data, which is kind of giving us some idea of the ground on how the user journeys should look like, for example, in R3 and beyond. So everyone's welcome to contribute your ideas into the document. And I think we'll dedicate the next session to refine more on the ideas that we discussed and then try to arrive at the user stories, which we couldn't touch today, but I think we'll have more ideas and more to discuss in the next session for this.
Sana,
Sure,
one
Shana.
quick question.
Go ahead, everyone.
One quick question. So are you going to plan to share your concept of north-south and east-west sometime next time? I mean,
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I do want to get to that stage, Wang, but we're first trying to understand the scope of Nephew. So once we have understood as a whole, as a community and this group, that this is the scope for Nephew and that's the best for Nephew to continue moving forward, then the rest would be our ability to identify our north, south, east, west APIs, which can intersect with the rest of the ecosystem and make it useful. One thing that I'm very clear about is that this particular layer has the action to it. The resources are handled through the Nephew artifacts, and that's where we need to allow for any closed loop to take action, whether the closed loop is happening internally, locally, within the infrastructure and the NF domain, or eventually, if the action has to come from the service layer or the network and a network service or end-to-end service, even then we need to have a mechanism to receive those triggers and be able to incorporate that into our action. That looks like a long term, but that is also important because the action layer is responsible for taking all the actions, local and external. And that's the diagram that I want to get to eventually after we have some more clarifications on how the scope looks like.
Thank you.
Sana, would you like to continue this discussion in sequence, or would it be okay if we open a new meeting so that people could come, comment, collaborate, discuss?
If you want to run a breakout session, Subhash, it's a completely, it's up to you. If I don't know if we have a working group that relates to the closed loop automation, but we should definitely have a working group dedicated to this. This is looking such a big theme. If you want to run that breakout session and gather some more ideas around what we discussed today, gather more user stories, that's perfectly fine. But I was hoping that in the next SIG meeting, we will review the updates, we will review the user stories, we will get to the later parts of the document that we couldn't touch today because we were on the high level discussion.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
And we can also circle back on that Slack channel where if you want to create another working group, we can consider creating another working group, and I will discuss that with Kaushik as well.
Okay, sure. Sure. Okay, I'll discuss with you later. Thank you.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Subhash.
Thank you.
Yep, excellent
Thank
discussion.
you,
Any other comments, final questions? Awesome. We'll see you again on the next SIG meeting next Monday.
Cool. Thanks, sir. Have a good one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.